afternoon and welcome to the third match in today's day 2 of the preliminary round of the public sector debate competition. We're delighted to have you in our company for this milestone staging of the competition, including those of you joining us on social media. I am Tomika Godmighty, Communication Specialist here at the Transformation Implementation Unit. Yesterday saw the beginning of intellect and wits as teams vie to advance in this competition. If you missed your favorite team, you can always catch up on the matches on our YouTube page at TIU_Jamaica and on Facebook at TIU Jamaica. Continuing the action this afternoon, we have with us the Ministry of Health and the Judiciary of Jamaica, and they will be debating the moot. Be it resolved that the role of ecotourism in climate adaptation is exaggerated. I repeat, be it resolved that the role of ecotourism in climate adaptation is exaggerated. Before we begin, we want to invite the teams to introduce themselves, starting with the team from the Ministry of Health.
Good afternoon. My name is Anicia Reed, Organizational Development Officer, Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Wilson, Public Education and Awareness Manager at the National Council on Drug Abuse Department of the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
A mouthful.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is I'm a research officer at the National Council of Drug Abuse, which is a department of the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
A mouthful. Thank you so much to the Ministry of Health. We now turn our attention to the team from the Judiciary of Jamaica as they introduce themselves.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nicholas Ranger. I'm the first speaker for the opposition this afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tenise Levy. I'm the second speaker for the Judiciary of Jamaica, and I'm a judicial counsel at the Supreme Court.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dominic Mason. On behalf of the Jamaica Judiciary from the Court of Appeal, I am a Chief Court Assistant.
Thank you so much to the team from the Judiciary of Jamaica. Also joining us this afternoon is our adjudication team from the Jamaica Association for Debating and Empowerment, and we invite our judges to introduce themselves.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robert Thomas Matthews, and I'll be your chair judge for today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kenesha Nelson, and I will be one of your judges for this match.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lacarina Nelson, serving as a wing adjudicator. All the best to both teams.
Thank you so much to our judges. Thank you, teams. Both teams are familiar with the rules, so I turn over now to our judges. All the best to both teams.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is the penultimate match of the day, and I'm sure that the temperatures are going to rise, yes? So, of course, this debate is governed by the Jade parliamentary format, which will see the first speaker presenting for 7 minutes. Second speakers, you'll have 6 minutes, and the third and final speakers from each team, you'll have 5 minutes to present your case. The first and last minute of each speech is what we consider protected time, in which no points of information will be allowed. Outside of those periods of protected time, we absolutely allow points of information, and I'll go as far as to say we encourage them. All right? Of course, we have the 2 periods of cross-examination that I'm sure are going to light the place on fire, and we're looking forward to those as well. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to call to order this match in the public sector debate competition for 2026. To do so, I invite the first speaker from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Anicia Reed.
Mr. Speaker, members of the adjudication panel, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Jamaica is considered one of the most climate vulnerable countries globally, with most of its population and economy exposed to these risks. This vulnerability is not theoretical. In Jamaica, we experienced Hurricane Beryl in 2024. And before we could fully recover, we had the record-breaking Melissa in 2025, noting the start of another hurricane season just round the corner. This reality underscores the need for us to use effective adaptation strategies to reduce the impacts of climate change on our Jamaica land we love. The discourse today finds us firmly supporting the moot, be it resolved that the role of ecotourism in climate adaptation is exaggerated. Now, Mr. Speaker, as first speaker for side proposition, I will outline the key terms, look at climate resilience infrastructure as the ideal priority for climate adaptability in comparison to ecotourism. Our second speaker will look at the negation of ecotourism and the true gap in public behavior. And our third speaker will help us all adapt to support the mood by solidifying our points. Allow me to clarify key terms. According to the Global Sustainable Tourism Council, ecotourism is a sustainable form of natural resource-based tourism that focuses primarily on experiencing and learning about nature. Ethically managed to be low impact, non-consumptive, and locally oriented, and it should contribute to the conservation or preservation of such areas. Climate adaptation refers to the deliberate actions taken to prepare for and adjust to the current and anticipated impacts of climate change, including more frequent hurricanes, droughts, coastal erosions, etc. And finally, according to the Cambridge Dictionary, to exaggerate is to make something seem larger, more important, better, or worse than it really is. In simple terms, this moot is asking us to decide whether people are overhyping how important ecotourism really is in helping countries like Jamaica deal with climate change. Our burden as proposition is to prove we give ecotourism too much credit as a key tool for climate adaptation, when in reality, there are other strategies that are more effective, more relevant, more urgent for a country like Jamaica. So essentially today's debate is not about whether ecotourism is good. We acknowledge it has value. The opposition must prove to us that ecotourism is direct and central to climate adaptation. Let me delve into my points. Mr. Speaker, public sector decision making requires prioritization of our very limited resources. Jamaica's climate change policy framework identifies major climate risks, including prolonged droughts, the damage to roads, pipelines, and dams, as well as the need for irrigation improvements, reforestation, and emergency water supply systems. So when we ask, what does Jamaica need to survive climate change? The first answer cannot be more nature tours. The answer is climate resilience infrastructure. That is, better drainage, better climate smart agriculture, stronger coastal protection, resilient housing, better waste management, and disaster financing. For Jamaica, upgrading our climate resilience infrastructure that keeps us functioning before, during, and after climate shocks is a priority because they are a direct response to climate adaptability. Ecotourism is not. Climate threats in Jamaica are national. Entire parishes flood, entire coastlines erode, and national GDP takes hits numerous amounts of times. Climate resilient infrastructure development operates at that same scale as it looks at national drainage systems, coastal defense infrastructure, climate resilient agriculture, and national water management. Ecotourism as we have it now is small, localized, and project-based, and simply cannot match the scale of the problem. Where is the scale? Where is the systemic impact? Where is the measurable national resilience? Because if we cannot match the scale of the problem, its role is being exaggerated. Climate resilient infrastructure development looks at strengthening and improving the resources of our climate resilient organizations such as NEPA, ODPEM, NSWMA, and the Ministry of Climate Change and Agriculture, where funding zooms in on structural climate adaptation. At current, investment in ecotourism through TEF and other donation prioritizes income generation before climate adaptation, which may or may not go back to the ecosystem. What is the issue here? Even to say ecotourism is a major adaptation tool because it brings money, it is an indirect and conditional argument. Again, we are not debating if ecotourism is valuable, because it is. It complements adaptation. It isn't foundational, and that right there is why the role is exaggerated. To further support this comparison, in the February 2026 performance report from the AG department, we noted that among the key things outlined that must be done in order to adapt to climate change, it was climate change legislation. Mr. Speaker, the audit did not see ecotourism as a main priority because it is not central to climate adaptability. Policies are. And Jamaica has already shown that more direct environmental policies can matter, as we saw with the single-use plastic ban, which targeted a key pollutant. That is direct adaptation relevant policy. Again, we are not saying that ecotourism policies doesn't have impact. Now, Mr. Speaker, we're here to look at climate resilient infrastructure from a financial standpoint, and we're saying that there are significant long-term financial gains by investing in resilient infrastructure. And if we focus on ecotourism as a climate adaptation strategy, we limit ourselves and overlook other critical components where we see the Minister of Water, Environment and Climate Change, Honorable Matthew Sambuda, says the adaptation strategy, one such strategy is the country's irrigation infrastructure as a climate adaptation strategy, and this will contribute to the nation's food security. This further supports that infrastructure development is a major priority because, Mr. Speaker, a nation cannot eat ecotourism. Mr. Speaker, I pause for you all to reflect on this and to hear how the opposition will address the task of proving to us that ecotourism is indeed central. I rest.
Thank you very much. We now invite the first speaker from the Judiciary of Jamaica, Nicholas Ranger. Hear, hear.
In light of the foregoing, the question begs, are we too quick to dismiss what we do not immediately recognize? Esteemed adjudicators, members of the audience here and online, good afternoon. My name, as stated, is Nicholas Ranger, and I stand before you as first speaker for the Judiciary of Jamaica in opposition of the moot. Be it resolved that the role of ecotourism in climate adaptation is exaggerated. Let me first state, this is not an accurate view. Our team will show how ecotourism incentivizes climate adaptation, creates economic stability at the community level, encourages compliance with government policies, preserves long-term resilience of natural infrastructure, all while advocating for responsible travel. At the end of the day, how can it be said that these things are exaggerations? Quite literally, what can go so? Jamaica, stop limiting adaptation to physical infrastructure. Seawalls, drainage systems, and engineered barriers can only do so much. Real climate change is far broader. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recognizes eco-based systems and their role in climate adaptation, while the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction also similarly makes it clear that resilience includes economic strength and community capacity. Mr. Speaker, our case is that ecotourism sustains natural infrastructure, shapes policy, and strengthens disaster risk management. Our second speaker will show how ecotourism achieves adaptation through education, socio-economic resilience, and by building awareness, while our third speaker will seal the deal and show why the moot ought rightly be rejected. Mr. Speaker, ecosystems such as coral reefs and mangroves function as protective barriers against all climate impacts occurring by sea. Coral reefs reduce wave energy before it reaches our shorelines, while mangroves absorb storm surge and reduce coastal flooding. According to the Nature Conservancy, coral reefs can dissipate up to 97% of wave energy, and the World Bank has documented the significant role of mangroves in reducing flood damage globally. The National Environment and Planning Agency, too, has explicitly identified coral reefs as natural defenses against storm surge and coastal erosion. To that end, they have implemented coral restoration initiatives like coral spawning and long-term reef monitoring. These efforts are replicated across tourism-dependent coastal zones where reef health directly influences both economic and environmental stability.
Point of information.
Not at this time. The Montego Bay Marine Park provides a clear example. As a protected area, it restricts harmful activities such as overfishing and reef destruction. It also supports tourism through snorkeling, diving, and educational engagement. Tourism revenue and stakeholder interest contribute to the maintenance and enforcement of that park. The result is a preserved reef system that not only attracts visitors, but also protects Jamaica's coastline from wave action and erosion. Ecosystems, not at this time, just a moment. Ecosystems supported by ecotourism generate economic value from healthy existence. That incentivizes their very protection. Those protected ecosystems then function as natural infrastructure, reducing the physical impact of climate hazards. This is not indirect or symbolic, Mr. Speaker. This is undeviated contributions that ecotourism has made to climate adaptation. One of the central challenges in climate adaptation is not the absence of policies as the proposition would have it, but the challenges in enforcing them. The government may designate protected areas or introduce environmental regulations, but without consistent incentives, these measures are often weakly enforced or undermined by competing economic pressures. Ecotourism addresses this by aligning environmental protection with economic benefit. Mr. Speaker, when ecosystems generate income through tourism, governments have a stronger incentive to protect them. Communities are more likely to support conservation efforts, and development is more likely to occur within sustainable limits. Nationally, the Planning Institute of Jamaica integrates environmental sustainability and tourism into long-term developmental planning. They recognize that economic growth is closely tied to environmental resilience. Similarly, the National Environment and Planning Agency enforces environmental protections, including the management of coastal zones and protected areas. At the international level, organizations such as the United Nations Development Programme promote ecosystem-based adaptation as a core climate strategy. Mr. Speaker, what this shows is that ecotourism does not sit outside of policy, as some would say. It, in fact, reinforces the applicable regulations. It transforms environmental protection from a regulatory obligation into an economic must-have, and that improves compliance and long-term sustainability. Effective disaster risk management, Mr. Speaker, operates across 3 stages: reducing risk, encouraging recovery, and ensuring that we are in a better state of preparedness for future events. Ecotourism contributes to all 3. In terms of risk reduction, ecosystems preserved through ecotourism, such as mangroves, wetlands, and coral reefs, absorb and mitigate the physical impacts of storms and flooding. The Black River Lower Morass is one example of a wetland system that contributes to flood control and coastal protection, while also supporting ecotourism activities that incentivize its preservation. Last year, we saw, after extreme weather events, tourism sectors pushed for normalcy rapidly. This diversification of income, Mr. Speaker, enhanced economic resilience and reduced long-term vulnerability. This debate is not one of whether ecotourism is the sole solution to climate change. It's about whether its role in climate adaptation has been exaggerated. We have shown so far, Mr. Speaker, that ecotourism sustains natural infrastructure, reinforces policy implementation, and strengthens disaster risk management. Those contributions are recognized internationally, embedded in national frameworks, and observed in real-world practice. Climate change requires the interaction of environmental, economic, and social systems working together, Mr. Speaker, and ecotourism is one of those sectors. For that reason, the opposition firmly rejects this motion. Thank you.
And thank you very much. That was Nicholas Ranger from the Judiciary of Jamaica. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, we're entering into the first period of cross-examination. This segment will see the Judiciary of Jamaica posing questions to the Ministry of Health. 3 questions in particular. Each question is limited to 10 seconds and each answer is limited to 45 seconds. It's important to note that for the team asking the question, only one may do so at a time. For the team answering the question, the entire team can chime in to provide that answer. After Judiciary has posed their 3 questions and they've been answered, we'll invite Ministry of Health to do the same. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, let us engage in the first period of cross-examination. We invite the Judiciary of Jamaica to pose their first question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now I wish to ask the proposition. You acknowledged that our country is already suffering from limited resources. Wouldn't you agree that that should be the very reason that we invest in and protect and ensure the preservation of natural resources?
We are not debating that matter at all. We did say that we want to protect, prioritize, and invest in our natural resources. The debate we have right now is if ecotourism directly impact that, and we're saying no, on the basis that while you're looking at the fact that it may assist, the damages there are sometimes greater than the good. But we'll deepen down in that when the second speaker comes.
Another question? What will happen to Jamaica with less reliance on its potential strengths in ecotourism? In other words, what will happen to Jamaica if we place less reliance on the potential strengths in ecotourism?
Well, we will place the focus on developing infrastructure, which will help Jamaica to adapt better. The reality is when we look at the recent impacts of the hurricanes, some people are still without homes. And yes, whilst we argue that yes, the mangroves do provide protection, we can as a country apply nature-based solutions and plant mangroves. It does not require tourists to come and visit it for it to be effective.
It must also be noted as well that we're not saying that we would not invest in ecotourism. The conversation is not if ecotourism is not valuable. We have already stated that it is. What we're saying is for climate adaptability, is ecotourism an ideal factor? That's the debate that we're having here.
Wouldn't you agree that heavy reliance on mechanical measures threatens to further exacerbate the negative?
Good afternoon again. Wouldn't you agree that heavy reliance on mechanical measures threatens to further exacerbate negative climate change rather than help?
As long as you're in the agreement with me that you have to contribute to the emissions, carbon-infused emissions that affect our ecosystems when you're trying to practice ecotourism. So we're not debating the fact that mechanisms are there, but mechanisms will in fact be done with integrity and of course consideration for ecosystems. So that's not a debate here either.
All right, thank you very much. That ends the first half of the first period of cross-examination. At this point in time, we invite the questions to be posed by the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
All right, so you mentioned earlier, well, so far your guys' arguments are hinging on the fact that ecotourism seems to help to preserve nature. The question I have to ask is, how can we prioritize ecotourism when ecotourism is vulnerable to climate change itself?
Well, we recognize that ecotourism is one component of the broader climate adaptation framework. And I think that you're conflating ecotourism with mass tourism. So what ecotourism does is that it promotes sustainable efforts in conserving our environment, and it also provides jobs to persons so that when we're affected by natural disasters, persons are able to better rebound after being faced with natural disasters. We see that the tourism sector has rebounded greatly after Hurricane Melissa. There are several articles which suggest that.
So you are saying, so I see that you are contextualizing ecotourism as solely the focus on replenishing nature-based solutions. Why are you ignoring my first speaker's contextualization of ecotourism, including the visit to nature spaces? Wouldn't that also be mass tourism?
Thank you for your question, but at the very root of its definition, in all ways, it aims to promote preservation and promote sustainability. So whether it's a guided tour, the guided tours are done in a manner that educates the participants as to their personal practices and the ways that they can play personal roles in the sustenance of the environment that they're visiting. So the point really was not addressed because it was not a full point in our determination. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Our final ecotourism happening. Our final question here actually focuses on the first speaker saying that policies are not needed, are not prioritized, rather more so when we're looking at ecotourism. But my question for you is, in order for ecotourism to be fulfilled, would we not have policies to back that?
So I believe what I had said was that the policies face the challenge of enforcement. What you are saying is, if I'm understanding correctly, I said they didn't exist. I never said that. What I said was that ecotourism pushes for the policies to be enforced, and it incentivizes the government taking stricter action and putting in place stricter measures. That is what I said, I believe.
All right, thank you very much for that first period of cross-examination. At this point in time, we'll invite the second speaker from the Ministry of Health and Wellness to extend the debate for side proposition.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to just focus on some points made by the first speaker earlier on today. We must admit again that, once again, we're saying that ecotourism is valuable. The debate here is not about ecotourism being valuable. The debate is ecotourism exaggerated when we're looking at climate adaptability? Your role has to show that ecotourism is central and, of course, is a key element to climate adaptability. The first speaker would have spoken about the fact that physical infrastructure alone cannot do it, but we did not focus on physical infrastructure alone. We focus on climate resilient infrastructure, which encompasses financing, policies, physical infrastructure, amongst other things. My first speaker would have so gracefully done that. Also, the first speaker would have also looked at the fact that ecotourism brings in revenue. Yes, we know the point of tourism is to factor in revenue, but when you look at tourism, it stands as an economic value and not adaptability. And if these policies are not enforced from ground level before we talk to tourists and say, dance here before you dance abroad, then who are we to determine that integrity will stand tall when money come out line to do things such as coral bleaching, etc., etc. Mr. Speaker, the first speaker would have showed that ecotourism does not match the scale of urgency that Jamaica's climate adaptation needs. And as second speaker, I will demonstrate something even more critical. Ecotourism in and of itself is not just limited, ladies and gentlemen. It is internally inconsistent as a climate adaptability strategy. In other words, the more we look at ecotourism, the more we examine it, is the more it undermines the own claim to be a meaningful adaptation tool. Lest we forget, that's what we're looking at. Ecotourism is structurally contradictory because it relies on carbon-intensive activities to promote environmental sustainability. So let me break that down for you. Ecotourism depends on international air travel, then ground transportation, then accommodation infrastructure, and resource consumption. So we are saying that people must fly across the world, burn fuel, consume resources, build infrastructure to show them how to protect the environment. Let's sit in that. We're flying people into a climate vulnerable island to demonstrate sustainability while increasing emissions to get them here. Ladies and gentlemen, that is a contradiction in itself. And it factors in greenwashing, where sustainability is marketed more than it is delivered. Ecotourism is visible. We know that. Tourists see